Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 1176, Detained.
Marfel unkle han.
You're referring to. Moo Peeling faltered upon hearing this and was beginning to stutter a little. That's right, I mentioned him to you once before, Junior Marshal Sister Moo. Fellow Daoist Violet Spirit once ventured into this valley with Marshal Uncle Han, which is how they were able to map out this safe route, Xianxia replied with a gentle smile. I met fellow Daoist Violet Spirit once several decades ago. She really was an exquisite beauty. Even a woman like me was entranced by her beauty. I heard that many prominent male cultivators have pursued her and many intense battles have taken place as they've attempted to compete over her. She's even being referred to by some as the most beautiful female cultivator in the Heavenly South region. However, this woman is rather mysterious and Master seemed to have made her acquaintance very early on, so she's kind of like a close confidant of his. You're going to have to be careful, Sister Moo. Liu Yu giggled in a teasing manner. A faint blush appeared on Moo Peeling's face as she scoffed. What do I have to be careful about? Xianxia adopted a serious expression as she asked, Stop teasing Junior Marshal Sister Moo, Junior Marshal Sister Liu, let's get back to business. Are we going to venture into the inner valley or not? Moo Peeling and Liu Yu's smiles faded and they looked at one another to find their own hesitant expression mirrored in each other's eyes. Senior Marshal Sister Song, is the map that this violet spirit gave you really a map of the route that Master once took? If that's the case, then we could certainly try it. After all, the illusionary spirit herb is very important for both of our upcoming breakthroughs, and I really don't want to go back empty-handed, Liu Yu said with furrowed brows. Moo Peeling was rather hesitant, but she succumbed to the temptation in the end, and sighed, if we're only searching for the herb close to the entrance of the inner valley, then I can come along as well. Xianxia nodded before extending words of caution. All right, now that that's settled, it looks like we'll be taking a risk. Let me make this clear in advance, though, we'll only be searching the area within several hundred kilometers of the entrance, and if we still can't find the illusionary spirit herb there, then we'll immediately exit the inner valley. No one is allowed to venture in any further. The pill is important, but not as important as our lives. Of course. If we were to venture deeper into the inner valley, even with a map at our disposal, it would still be akin to suicide for mere core formation cultivators like us. I heard that there are some ancient beasts within the inner valley that even nascent soul cultivators wouldn't dare to face in battle, Liu Yu said with a smile. Those ancient beasts normally lurk within the depths of the inner valley, so we should be fine if we stay near the entrance. Let's not waste any more time with words. We've already spent a lot of time here, so we should make haste, Moo Peeling said in a decisive manner. The other two women didn't want to delay any longer, either, and the three of them shot forth as streaks of light toward a certain direction. 5 days later, at the border of the inner valley, amid a world of ice and snow, 3 women appeared in the bone-chilling wind. Not far behind them was a massive ice crystal, and they were situated on the very same path that Han Li and Violet Spirit had taken with the other Ghost Spirit sect disciples all those years ago. The 3 women had already conjured up dense light barriers around their bodies, so they didn't have to fear these biting winds. After discussing quietly among themselves for a while, the 3 women rose only several tens of feet above the ground before flying slowly toward the distance, not daring to speed up in the slightest. This realm of ice and snow wasn't very large in area, so it only took the 3 of them less than half a day to fly out of this region, upon an extremely lush mountain appeared before their eyes. The 3 of them were ecstatic upon seeing this, and they split up to search for the herb again. A day and a night later, the 3 women gathered once again on the mountain summit. After looking at one another, wry smiles appeared on all of their faces. There are many spiritual medicines here on the mountain that can't be found in the outer valley, but there are no illusionary spirit herbs here, Liu Yu said in a gloomy voice. Same story on my end. I didn't find the illusionary spirit herb, but I gathered all of the ingredients required for another pill that I'm trying to make. At the very least, I won't be leaving this place completely empty-handed. Mu Peeling didn't know whether she should laugh or cry. It looks like we won't be finding the illusionary spirit herb on this trip. Let's return to the sect. Song Yu heaved a dejected sigh. Let's do another thorough search. Perhaps we might have missed some places. Liu Yu was unwilling to give up. Song Yu shook her head as she said in an implacable voice, "Let it go. Don't try to force the issue. The inner valley is too dangerous, and even if we only stick to an area near the entrance, accidents could still happen if we stay here for too long. We're leaving right away." A hint of reluctance appeared on Liu Yu's face, and just as she was about to say something, a loud rumbling thunderclap suddenly erupted in the distance. The three women faltered upon hearing this, and they all turned toward that direction in unison. There, they discovered a shadowy mass of dark clouds that were rapidly flying toward them, moving at such an incredible speed that it was expanding in their field of vision at a rate that was discernible to the naked eye. The dark clouds were tumbling erratically, and loud thunderclaps were erupting from within, creating a very intimidating sight to behold. The three women were naturally able to identify that something was amiss with that mass of dark clouds, and Song Yu immediately exclaimed, "This is bad. There's something wrong with those clouds. It could be an ancient beast." Thus, the three of them leaped into the air and immediately flew toward the direction they had come in. The rumbling creature within the dark clouds seemed to have caught sight of the three women, and it sped up even further as it hurtled toward them. At the same time, a burst of cold cackled rang out from within. "It's not an ancient beast. It appears to be a devil Dao cultivator." Liu Yu's roots lay in the devil Dao herself, so she immediately managed to identify what these dark clouds were upon hearing the cold cackling. Regardless of what it is, it definitely doesn't harbor any benevolence toward us. We can't engage it in a direct battle. At the sight of the approaching dark clouds, Song Yu was starting to get quite flustered. She hurriedly patted the storage pouch hanging from her waist, and a white bead appeared in her hand. She then began to chant something, and the bead swayed before transforming into a ball of white clouds and mist that enshrouded the three of them within. The white cloud then shuddered before flying through the air like a shooting star, traveling at a speed that wasn't inferior to that of the dark clouds behind them. "You dare to use these pitiful tricks against me?" An eerie voice sounded from within the dark clouds before they tumbled and materialized into a massive black hand. The hand disappeared in a flash, transforming into a streak of black light over 100 feet in length. Its speed also increased drastically, and just a few flashes later, it had already gained significantly on the three women. "That's a nascent soul devil cultivator behind us. We have to think of a way to impede him." Song Yu's urgent voice sounded from within the white cloud. "I'll release my spirit insects. Even if I have to sacrifice my centipedes, I'll make sure to stop him in his tracks for now," Liu Yu offered. As soon as her voice fell, 7 or 8 snowy white centipedes that were around half a foot in length shot forth from within the white cloud before throwing themselves at the pursuing black light. 6-winged frost centipedes. Ha ha, if it isn't Liu Yu, you little brat. Are you trying to use these little bugs to hold me off? The man within the black light began to chortle with amusement. Several thin pitch-black tendrils suddenly shot forth from within the black light, puncturing the bodies of the white centipedes in a flash. Meanwhile, the streak of black light itself simply skirted around the centipedes without any pause or hesitation. The centipedes were completely stationary as they hovered in mid-air. Only after a short while were they completely engulfed in black flames and were incinerated into nothingness. The 6-winged frost centipedes were somehow completely unable to withstand these peculiar black flames. The three women within the white cloud were horrified upon seeing this. In particular, Liu Yu was extremely stunned. She didn't know who this devil cultivator was, and his voice sounded very unfamiliar to her, but he had somehow managed to glean her identity just from seeing her centipedes. The black streak of light was simply far too fast, and before the three women could think of any strategies to keep it at bay, it was already upon them. It circled through the air before transforming into a massive black hand again, reaching out toward the white cloud without any inhibition. The three women cried out in unison as 3 swords, a long halberd, and a scepter shot forth from within the white cloud at the same time. Black light flashed over the surface of the massive hand, and it grabbed a hold of all of those treasures. When it spread open its fingers again, all of the treasures had disappeared. However, in that split second of delay, the white cloud suddenly exploded and 3 streaks of light hurtled toward different directions. The 3 women were splitting up so that at the very least, not all of them would be doomed. However, an incredible sequence of events then unfolded. A large swath of black light suddenly erupted from the massive hand, sweeping toward all 3 women at once, and dragging them back despite the fact that they were all flying in different directions. Thus, the massive black hand captured all 3 of them at once. The 3 women were stunned and horrified, and protective spiritual light was flashing desperately over their bodies as they attempted to free themselves with all their might. However, right at this moment, a cold harumph sounded beside their ears. Bursts of black chi wafted out from the massive hand, spraying the 3 women directly in the face, upon which all 3 of them immediately fell unconscious. Only then did the black hand release the 3 women and transform into a vast expanse of black chi. The black chi then converged toward the center to form a tall and broad humanoid figure. The humanoid figure's entire body was pitch black in color, yet its eyes were shimmering with a harrowing green light. The black figure looked at the 3 women and cackled. Who would have thought that it would be these 3? This is good. If I can capture them, then that man will be even more wary of me. He, all 3 of these women are closely related to you. You probably won't sacrifice yourself to save them, but I'm sure I'll be able to extort you a little. After an indeterminate period of time, Song Yu, who was the most powerful among the 3 women, awakened first. She looked around to find that she was lying on the cold hard ground with stone pillars that were shimmering with white light all around her. A jolt of shock ran through her heart and she immediately sat up. At the same time, she made a hand seal in an attempt to unleash her protective spiritual light. However, a cry of surprise erupted, and Song Yu slumped to the ground once again. Chapter 1177, The Second Nascent Soul and the Sovereign Devil Corpse. I've already placed a restriction on you, so don't even think about using your magic power. You're now no different from a mortal. A lazy voice suddenly sounded, drawing the horrified gaze of Song Yu. In the corner of a cave, there was a tall and broad shadowy figure sitting with his legs crossed. Due to the fact that he had been sitting completely still, Song Yu had failed to notice him initially. Almost at the exact same moment, she discovered that she was indeed unable to draw upon any of her magic power. It appeared that a powerful restriction really had been placed upon her, and her heart sank upon making this discovery. Who are you? And why have you captured us? Song Yu looked around to discover Mu Peeling and Liu Yu lying next to her. Even though they were both unconscious, they appeared to be largely unscathed, and she was very relieved to see this. I didn't think that I would encounter the 3 of you in the inner valley. You can only blame your terrible luck for running into me, and doing so right at a juncture when the 3 of you could prove to be useful to me. Martial Niece Song, if the 3 of you stay here without trying to pull any shenanigans, I won't hurt any of you. However, if you try to escape, then don't blame me for hurting you, the humanoid figure threatened in a cold voice. Song Yu faltered slightly upon hearing this. Martial Niece. I don't recall having a senior like you in our sect. You must have the wrong person, senior. It's no surprise that you don't recognize me. All you have to know is that you're my martial niece. How's that little brat, Violet Spirit? The humanoid figure asked. You know Violet Spirit. Who are you? Song Yu yelled with alarm. It's simple for me to show you who I am, the shadowy figure murmured before suddenly rising to his feet and making his way toward Song Yu. After just a few steps, the humanoid figure had emerged from the darkness and revealed himself to Song Yu. He wore a set of long black robes with a skeletal head on his shoulders. There was also a pair of large tusks protruding from his mouth, creating an extremely terrifying sight to behold. Furthermore, the man had an arm exposed, and that arm appeared to have been constructed from shimmering metal, which was also very unsettling. Song Yu repressed the horror and disgust in her heart as she asked, Who are you? I definitely haven't met you before. Really? In my current state, it's no surprise that you don't recognize me, the black-robed figure mused calmly. However, a peculiar look suddenly appeared in his eyes as he turned toward Song Yu. As their eyes met, Song Yu was abruptly struck by a sense of familiarity, and a thought suddenly occurred to her. You're. That's impossible. Song Yu exclaimed. You've finally recognized me. Don't be so alarmed, the current me isn't that man yet. However, it won't be long before I'll become him. The black-robed figure chuckled eerily before his body swayed, and he sat down in his original spot with his legs folded, no longer paying any heed to Song Yu. Song Yu's eyes were filled with incredulity and waves of shock were surging through her heart. The figure of a youth appeared in her mind, combining with this black-robed figure, then separating into two again. Could it be that this man really was Martial Uncle Han? But he clearly didn't look like this in the past. Could it be that something happened to him during his journey, so he had been forced to resurrect himself through possession? But that couldn't be the case, either. Even though this martial uncle of hers was only at the mid-nascent soul stage, his combat prowess was not inferior to that of late-nascent soul cultivators, so how could he have been reduced to such a pitiful state? Furthermore, even if his body really had been destroyed and his nascent soul was forced to possess a new vessel, why didn't he return to the sect to rest and recover? Why would he hide in this Devilfall Valley instead, and why would he attack the three of them? What do you mean by that? Song Yu was an extremely intelligent woman, but even her brain was unable to keep up with what was happening. The black-robed man suddenly opened his eyes, and harumphed, You two are clearly already awake, so why do you continue to pretend to be unconscious? Song Yu faltered slightly upon hearing this, and before she had a chance to look beside her with elation, Mu Peeling's voice sounded from behind her. You're not my lord, you're his second nascent soul. How were you able to escape from my lord's control and attain a sentient will of your own? Where is my lord right now? Her words were extremely peculiar, and from the tone of her voice was filled with concern and horror. You're right, Junior Martial Sister Mu, this man is indeed the second avatar that Master refined. Liu Yu suddenly chimed in a startled voice. She also wore an incredulous look on her face. Song Yu turned to discover that both of the women beside her had sat up, and Liu Yu had her hand pressed over her face, leaving only her astonished eyes visible. Mu Peeling stared intently at the shadowy figure as she said, I don't know the specifics, but I've heard that my lord cultivated an extremely rare secret technique in our human world that can allow him to materialize a second nascent soul. However, this is an extremely perilous endeavor, and the one using this technique could easily suffer backslash from this second nascent soul after it attains sentient will of its own. Song Yu and Liu Yu both looked at one another upon hearing this. I'm surprised you were able to recognize me. Oh, I remember now. You're the girl that Silver Moon once mentioned to me. In any case, I don't plan on hiding anything. I was indeed once that man's second nascent soul, but after I engulf his soul, he will be me, and I will be him. The three of you had better stay here and not try to escape. If everything goes smoothly, then I'll release all of you. This is an extremely obscure location in the inner valley, and even if that man were to search for you in person, there's no way that he would be able to find this place, the black-robed man willingly admitted. He was none other than Han Li's second nascent soul, which had gone missing during his battle with the illustrious Grand Immortal of the Soaring Tribe. At the time, the nascent soul had been severely wounded by an illustrious Grand Immortal, and it should have been completely destroyed. However, the second nascent soul had cultivated in the profound yin devilish qi that Han Li had bestowed upon it, which activated the protective ability of the ghost sifting banner, which had been injected with myriad depth devilish qi. As such, the nascent soul was sucked into the banner, where pure devilish qi had been injected into it as part of emergency treatment. If Han Li weren't too far away from the nascent soul, once the second nascent soul awakened, it would automatically return to Han Li's side. However, Han Li had also been severely wounded at the time and was forced to seal himself in ice before drifting all the way to the Great Jin. As such, after the second nascent soul has completely healed, it was unable to find Han Li, and began to roam the grasslands. About 2 or 3 decades later, it finally developed a hint of sentient will and immediately returned to the Great Jin. It then traveled to the Devilfall Valley and easily found the sovereign devil corpse, which was stumbling around in the inner valley like a zombie. Even though the devil corpse had been severely damaged by an ancient devil before, it was able to slowly recover to its former state. However, it was moving around completely instinctively as it had lost Han Li's guidance. If several centuries were to pass, it wouldn't be impossible for the devil corpse to attain sentient will of its own. However, after being discovered by the second nascent soul, it was able to use the restriction that Han Li had used in the past to easily take over the devil corpse and engulf the tiny hint of essence within. This was why the second nascent soul hadn't possessed any other cultivator, and instead headed straight for the Devil Fall Valley. After all, it would be very difficult to possess a nascent soul cultivator's body, and there was a good chance that the roles would be reversed, and the prey would kill the hunter. This devil corpse had the power of a nascent soul cultivator, but it just so happened to not have any sentient will, so it was the ideal possession target. Thus, the second nascent soul sought it out without any hesitation. The nascent soul drew upon the residual devilish chi left behind by the ancient devil's body in the spatial rift, then used the sovereign devil corpse's corpse chi as a foundation, and recruited the assistance of the ghost sifting banner, allowing it to cultivate most of the profound yin devilish chi in just a short few decades. As such, it was able to reach the mid-nascent soul stage. After that, it discovered a few treasures within secret locations in the valley and refined them before preparing to exit the valley, and it just so happened to bump into Mu Peeling's trio. Initially, he didn't know that it was these three women that he was hunting down. However, due to the fact that it had cultivated the profound yin devilish chi, then been injected with pure devilish chi, and finally engulfed the sovereign devil corpse's essence, the nascent soul had become completely different from Han Li. It was extremely aggressive and vicious, and it immediately attacked these three core formation cultivators. On the one hand, killing them would completely eradicate any possibility of them revealing its location to anyone, and on the other hand, it would be a good way to vent its ferocious tendencies. However, after sifting through Han Li's memories, the second nascent soul was able to identify the three women, and after a brief hesitation, it changed its mind. Instead of killing them, it captured the three women and set up a restriction to detain them here. Mu Peeling was lamenting over her misfortune, but she still mustered up her courage, and asked, "How long do you plan on holding us captive?" The reason why she was able to immediately recognize this second nascent soul was because when Silver Moon had been delivering pills to her, she had also given Mu Peeling a nameless jade pendant, which she had always carried with her since. At the time, Silver Moon had hidden a wisp of the second nascent soul's aura in that jade pendant, thereby allowing the carrier of the pendant to detect the second nascent soul's presence at close quarters. Mu Peeling had always been quite perplexed about why Silver Moon had done that, but she suddenly understood the reason behind this now. She had most likely anticipated that there was a possibility that the second nascent soul would escape from Han Li's control, and she had given her this jade pendant to avoid any potential mishaps. As such, she was able to use this treasure to immediately identify who their captor was. Upon hearing Mu Peeling's question, the black-robed figure glared coldly at her, and replied, "Of course it's when there's only one Han Li left in this world." After making sense of the situation, Song Yu had also recomposed herself, and she asked in a calm voice, "With Martial Uncle's abilities and rate of cultivation, do you really think you have a chance?" "The current me is indeed no match for him, but I have a good chance of being able to escape with my life. Besides, with the three of you held captive, he's going to be a lot more wary, so that gives me even better chances. As for how I'm going to be able to bring him down, that's not something for you three to worry about." The black-robed figure chuckled, yet didn't reveal anything. Then, Liu Yu was just about to say something, but the black-robed figure suddenly cut her off. "All right, I know what you three are plotting, but don't even think about it. The only scenarios in which you three will be able to escape from here will be when I engulf that man's soul, or he wipes away my sentient will and reduces me to his second nascent soul again. For now, all three of you should just take a long nap." The black-robed figure suddenly made a hand seal and began to chant something. Spiritual light of all colors suddenly began to shimmer on the ground around the three women as large swaths of black chi emerged. Only then did the three of them discover that they were situated at the center of a massive formation. The trio was inundated by black chi, and fell unconscious again. Only then did the black-robed figure sitting in the corner stop his chanting and undid his hand seal. However, there was a complex and indecisive light shimmering in its eyes as it looked at the black chi. Chapter 1178. A thunderous reputation within the heavenly south region. A month later, within the Xianwu Hall of the Great Truth Sect, which is the self-proclaimed #1 righteous sect in the heavenly south region, there stood an elderly Daoist priest with a set of infantile facial features, yet hair and beard that were completely white. He was staring at the white jade slip in his hand with furrowed brows, and there was an indecisive look shimmering in his eyes. A short while later, he heaved a long sigh and called out, "Come." As soon as his voice fell, 2 middle-aged Daoist priests walked in from outside the hall. The 2 Foundation Establishment Taoists priests bowed and asked, "What can we do for you, sect master?" The Daoist priest handed over the jade slip with a grave expression and instructed, "Send this invitation to the golden iridescent valley. Tell them that a 4th great cultivator has appeared in the state of Xi, and that the Drifting Cloud sect has extended invitations to their celebratory ceremony. As the Grand Elder, if is going to attend the ceremony in person, or if other seniors will attending in his stead." The 2 Daoist priests' expressions changed slightly upon hearing this before both of them said in a respectful manner, "Yes, sect master. We'll be sure to deliver the message." The 2 of them then took the jade slip and left the hall as 2 streaks of light. At the Heavenly Yang Pond, a renowned restricted area of the Harmonious Bond sect. This was not a very large pond, only several thousand feet in size. However, the pond was enshrouded under dense mist all year round, and no one was allowed to enter the mist without permission, even the nascent soul stage elders of the sect. Normally, there would be barely any people around in a radius of 10 kilometers around the Heavenly Yang Pond. However, at this moment, there were 5 or 6 cultivators standing side by side over 100 feet away from the mist. All of them wore different attire, and there were both men and women among them. But the one thing they had in common was that all of them were looking at the mist before them in silence. The 4th great cultivator, eh? That Han Bradshaw is progressing quite fast in his cultivation. I knew that he would get to this point sooner or later, but I didn't think that he would ascend to the heights in just a century. Seeing as this is the case, it looks like I'll have to attend this celebratory ceremony in person. A faint sigh sounded from within the mist. The cultivators outside the mist continued to stand rooted to the spot, and none of them dared to say anything in response. On a certain island among the 7 spirit islands, there was an azure-robed elderly man with a set of plain features standing at the edge of a cliff. His hands were clasped behind his back and he had cast his gaze out calmly across the boundless ocean. However, in one of his hands was a white jade slip that was shimmering with faint spiritual light. Within a pavilion on the state of Beiliang's gem-cut mountains, there was a man with a set of refined features sitting across from a portly elderly man, both of whom were seated in wooden chairs. The elderly man wore a careful expression as he asked, "Senior Wu, will you be attending the Drifting Cloud sect's celebratory ceremony in person?" That man has reached the late nascent soul stage at such a young age, and with his remaining lifespan, he'll be able to stand at the pinnacle of the Heavenly South region for 7 to 8 more centuries. If we re-establish good relations with him, then our 6 sects have nothing to worry about. What do you suggest, Marshal Nisley? You've taken over the sect, so you want to invite that man back to your valley? The man asked in an indifferent voice. You're misunderstanding me, Senior. With his current lofty status, How would be willing to return to our measly Yellow Maple Valley. However, he does have some ties with our valley, and if we can strengthen those bonds, it would undoubtedly be beneficial to our 6 sects. The man was silent for a moment before saying expressionlessly, "Don't expect me to be able to contribute to this matter. I was once rather close with Junior Marshal Sister Nangong, but I've never contacted her again ever since she left with that man. However, I'll be representing the Masked Moon sect to attend this ceremony. It would be great if you'd be willing to make the trip in person, Senior Wu." The elderly man was ecstatic to hear this. HMH, it's no wonder that your Yellow Maple Valley is so nervous about this man. Ever since fellow Daoist Linghu passed away, no other nascent soul cultivator had appeared in your valley. If it weren't for the fact that fellow Daoist Linghu once made an agreement with this man and notified our 5 sects about it, your Yellow Maple Valley would have most likely been banished from the stage of Beiliang already, the man chuckled. I apologize for our incompetence, Senior. An awkward look appeared on the elderly man's face upon hearing this. Within a span of 2 months, the entire Heavenly South region had erupted into a frenzy. All of the cultivation sects of decent scale in the entirety of the Heavenly South region had received the invitations sent out by the Drifting Cloud sect. They were claiming that one of their elders had reached the late nascent soul stage, and they were holding a grand ceremony to celebrate this event, which was why these invitations had been sent out. It wasn't made clear on the invitation which elder they were referring to, But Han Li had established himself long ago as the #1 cultivator in the Heavenly South region beneath the late nascent soul stage, so it wasn't difficult to guess that Han Li had to have been the elder in question. Thus, all of the sects were in a state of uproar. Some of the sects were completely overawed and immediately agreed to attend the ceremony. Some of the larger sects were rather suspicious about the authenticity of this news, but they also all agreed to send at least an elder to attend the ceremony. Thus, Han Li's name shook the entire Heavenly South region once again. Regardless of whether one was an itinerant cultivator who had been dwelling in seclusion for many years or a member of a prominent cultivation sect, it was extremely likely that they had heard Han Li's name at one point or another. Everyone was discussing spiritedly about the fourth great cultivator of the Heavenly South region, who had ascended to the late nascent soul stage at such a young age. Thus, 3 months passed, and the Drifting Cloud sect ceremony was held. There were over 100 nascent soul cultivators in attendance, and several times that number in core formation cultivators who had also arrived at the Dream Cloud Mountains. The star of the show, Han Li, only appeared for a short while on the first day of the ceremony and delivered a simple address before inviting the dozen or so elders from all of the sects, who were at the mid-nascent soul stage or above, to a smaller gathering in an obscure hall within the Drifting Cloud sect. Among them, there were 2 late nascent soul great cultivators, namely Old Devil Concord of the Harmonious Bond sect, and Wei Wuya of the Flowing Mind sect. After 3 days and 3 nights, all of these nascent soul cultivators finally re-emerged from the hall, all of them with horrified expressions on their pale faces. Wei Wuya and Old Devil Concord were also quite disheartened and wore strained expressions on their faces. Some of the cultivators present at the ceremony naturally noticed this, and tried to inquire about what had happened during their gathering. However, the nascent soul cultivators being questioned either remained silent with wry smiles on their faces, or shook their heads with fearful expressions, or completely ignored the questions being directed toward them in general. That made all of the cultivators even more curious. The ceremony lasted half a month, during which time Han Li made no further appearances. To everyone's surprise, the dozen or so most powerful nascent soul cultivators present took no offense to this whatsoever, and as soon as the ceremony came to a conclusion, all of them fled the Drifting Cloud sect as if they were escaping from something extremely fearsome. Thus, all of the remaining cultivators were even more curious about what had taken place in that obscure hall. What could have possibly petrified so many powerful nascent soul cultivators to such an extent? Even though none of the nascent soul cultivators in question were willing to disclose any information to those who had attended the ceremony, all of them had a few close friends and relatives whom they revealed the situation to. Thus, the news that everyone had been dying to hear was leaked in the end anyway. However, the contents of the news shook the entire Heavenly South region again. It was revealed that this new great cultivator of the Drifting Cloud sect had challenged Wei Wuya and Old Devil Concord to a sparring match during the small gathering. This was quite a normal request. After all, this elder Han had just reached the late nascent soul stage, so he was taking this opportunity to test out his abilities as well as to intimidate all of the other mid-nascent soul cultivators. However, what came as a surprise to everyone was that he had challenged both Wei Wuya and Old Devil Concord at once. Furthermore, the result of the sparring match had everyone even more flabbergasted. Han Li unleashed several incredible techniques and summoned a few absurdly powerful treasures to easily defeat the 2 great cultivators. Wei Wuya and Old Devil Concord had stood at the pinnacle of the Heavenly South region for several hundred years, yet even after joining forces, they were still swept aside with ease by Han Li, and both of them had sustained some injuries during the sparring match. What was even more astonishing to everyone who had witnessed the match was that Han Li didn't even appear to have unleashed all of the tricks up his sleeve. All of the nascent soul cultivators were completely speechless. During the remaining time, Han Li held a discussion with all of the nascent soul cultivators about cultivation experiences and insights. However, all of them felt as if they were sitting on a bed of nails the entire time, and the last thing they wanted to was to remain in Han Li's presence for any longer. Thus, all of them fled the obscure hall at the conclusion of the 3 days, looking as if they had just seen a ghost. This astonishing news spread like wildfire, and it was naturally the case that most people didn't believe this to be true. However, the news continued to spread, and all of the nascent soul cultivators who had been present during the sparring match chose to remain silent, and not even a single one of them stepped forward to refute these claims. Only then did everyone realize that this news could indeed be true, and the entire Heavenly South region was completely stunned. Thereafter, anyone who discussed any topic concerning Henli spoke in hushed tones, regardless of where they were and to whom they were speaking, and they didn't dare to extend any disrespect toward Henli with their words. Thus, Henli's reputation as the #1 cultivator in the Heavenly South region slowly began to spread. In the air above the sea close to the 7 Spirit Islands, a middle-aged Daoist priest with pristine and translucent skin was facing an azure-robed elderly man from afar. Both of them wore dark expressions and remained completely silent. After a long while, the azure-robed elderly man stirred as he broke the silence. "Why have you suddenly come here and invited me to this place through voice transmission, Brother Sunreach? You're not here to challenge me to a staring contest, are you? If you have something to say, then just say it." This azure-robed elderly man was none other than one of the 3 great cultivators, Wei Wuya. "Brother Wei, why are you asking a question that you already know the answer to? Can you not guess why I would invite you to meet me out here?" The middle-aged Daoist priest asked calmly. "He, looks like even you can't sit still any longer after hearing the news, Brother Sunreach." A hint of a deriding sneer appeared on Wei Wuya's face. A grave expression appeared on the Daoist priest's face as he asked, "Does that mean the rumors are true? You and old Devil Concord really did fall to a disadvantage against that man." Chapter 1179, Refining the Wings. Wei Wuya's eyes narrowed as he asked, "We fell to a disadvantage? Even you think that to be true? What do you mean? Could it be that you and Concord really were unable to defeat that Han brat?" Master Sunreach exclaimed. "You think far too highly of me, Brother Sunreach. Even after we joined forces, we were only able to last a short while before both of us were completely crushed," Wei Wuya replied with a wooden expression. "That's impossible. No matter how powerful that Han brat is, he's still just a new late-nascent soul cultivator. It would already be extraordinary if his combat prowess were slightly superior to one of ours. How could it be the case that both of you combined were unable to defeat him?" Master Sunreach shook his head vehemently, refusing to believe this. A fearful look flashed through Wei Wuya's eye as he said, "I take no pleasure in admitting mine and Concord's inability to match a new great cultivator. Do you think there's any reason for me to lie to you? Also, you can laugh at me all you want, but I'm not afraid to tell you that this man is unfathomably powerful. On the surface, it appeared that we suffered a close defeat, but he hadn't even used his full power yet. I could sense that if he wanted to, he could have killed Concord and myself right there and then." Master Sunreach was completely rooted to the spot upon hearing that. "Of course, if you don't believe me, you're free to head to the Drifting Cloud sect and challenge him for yourself. You came all this way here from the Great Truth sect, so I suppose that must be what you're planning to do already." A cold smile suddenly appeared on Wei Wuya's face. Master Sunreach's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, but he didn't refute that assumption, indicating that Wei Wuya had indeed been right. "If I were you, I would save myself the humiliation. In any case, I'm about to reach the end of my lifespan anyway, so no matter how powerful that Han brat is, it doesn't matter to me. However, you and old Devil Concord will most likely be around for many more years, so I'd advise you not to get on that man's bad side," Wei Wuya said calmly. "What? You're about to reach the end of your lifespan, Brother Wei?" Master Sunreach faltered slightly before a shocked expression appeared on his face. "Indeed. I reached the late nascent soul stage over 200 years earlier than you two did, so it's only natural that I'll be passing on ahead of you too. It'll probably happen sometime during the next few years. You and Concord still have some time, and perhaps there's a chance for you two to reach the deity transformation stage." A slightly dejected look appeared on Wei Wuya's face. "Brother Wei, you..." Master Sunreach wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say, and a complex expression appeared on his face. "Regardless of how powerful we become, everything will come to an end as long as we haven't attained the Great Tao. Brother Sunreach, you and I have known each other for many years, and I'd advise you to listen to me one last time. Do not get involved in the affairs in the Heavenly South region. Just focus on your own cultivation and think about nothing else. Don't become like me, a silly old man who can only await the embrace of death." After I pass away, even if you were to join forces with old Devil Concord, you still wouldn't be a match for that Han brat. In that case, you may as well relinquish the title of the #1 sect in the Heavenly South region and completely bury the hatchet. In any case, it's only normal for a sect to have periods of prosperity punctuated by less glamorous stretches. If you do that, I'm sure that Han brat won't insist on hunting down you and old Devil Concord. You'll be able to then focus wholeheartedly on reaching the deity transformation stage, Wei Wuya urged. Thank you for your advice, Brother Wei. I'll be sure to consider it carefully. Wei Wuya's words were extremely genuine and heartfelt, and even Master Sun Reach was slightly tempted to take his advice. All right, I've said everything there is to be said. It's up to you whether you want to heed my advice or not. I'm returning to the island now. This will most likely be our final meeting. Wei Wuya cupped his fist in a salute, and before Master Sun Reach could say anything further, he was already flying back toward the 7 Spirit Islands. As for Master Sun Reach, he remained rooted to the spot with a contemplative look on his face. After a long while, he finally heaved a faint sigh and also flew into the distance as a streak of white light. However, he was flying directly toward the state of Xi. He still wanted to see Han Li's power with his own eyes before he made his decision. If this new great cultivator really was as fearsome as the rumors suggested, then he would immediately heed Wei Wuya's advice and go into seclusion to try and reach the deity transformation stage. A month later, another piece of news began to circulate throughout the Heavenly South region. It was said that Master Sun Reach had visited the Drifting Cloud sect in person, only to depart after only half a day. Following his return to the Great Truth sect, he suddenly announced that he was going into seclusion for an indefinite period of time. This piece of news naturally drew further speculation from the sects within the Heavenly South region. However, at this point, even the most dim-witted cultivators could figure out that this Grand Elder of the Great Truth sect had definitely been able to come out on top against Han Li otherwise. Why he put on such a display of weakness as soon as he returned to his sect? As such, Han Li's reputation as the #1 cultivator in the Heavenly South region had well and truly been cemented. The Drifting Cloud sect's influence also began to expand drastically, and within the short span of a few months, they had taken over most of the state of Xi. All of the other cultivation sects in the state of Xi either had to concede to them, or re-establish their sects in another nation. Due to the fact that the Ancient Sword sect and the 100 Possibilities Pavilion were also situated on the Dream Cloud Mountains, they were spared from this assimilation process and also managed to expand their forces as well. However, they had virtually become subsidiaries to the colossus that was the Drifting Cloud sect, and they were constantly basking in a mixture of pain and pleasure. In a cave abode within the interconnected peaks of the Drifting Cloud sect, Han Li sat with his eyes tightly shut and his legs folded inside a secret chamber. There was a massive formation that had been carved onto the ground, at the very center of which a pair of snowy white wings was hovering in the air. There were arcs of silver lightning flashing incessantly over their surface, but at the same time, they had been enshrouded within a ball of azure and white flames. With each and every revolution, immeasurable and dense layers of runes would emerge on the surface of the wings. Han Li was making hand seals to activate the formation spell, which was unleashing azure and white pillars of fire that were constantly refining the wings. After an indeterminate period of time, Han Li withdrew his hand seals and opened his eyes. He looked at the wings rotating slowly within the flames and pointed a finger toward it. The wings immediately shuddered as azure light erupted from within. The silver arcs of lightning running along its surface also rumbled violently, creating an astonishing commotion. However, Han Li's brows were slightly furrowed with discontentment. After a brief pause, he suddenly opened his mouth and expelled a small azure cauldron from within. The cauldron spun around in the air before landing on the ground before him. What is it now? I've already elaborated on the refinement method for you on more than one occasion. A faint sigh sounded from within the cauldron. The voice was clearly very tender, yet the tone being used was very mature and jaded, creating quite an amusing contrast. However, Han Li was not amused at all as he said in a cold voice, I've already infused the Kuan Peng feather into the thunderstorm wings in accordance to your refinement method. It's able to use wind attribute spiritual power now, but it's only about as powerful as a spirit treasure replica like the Triflame fan. It's nowhere near as powerful as you had proclaimed it would be. Were you intentionally lying to me? Han Li's expression was extremely dark. That's impossible. The Kuan Peng feather is an extraordinary treasure. How could it have only resulted in such a minimal enhancement effect? Let me see the thunderstorm wings you're refining first. Spiritual light shimmered on the lid of the cauldron and a faint humanoid figure emerged. It was none other than the projection materialized by the endless sky beast. Han Li didn't say anything as he waved a hand toward the wings. The thunderstorm wings shot forth as a streak of azure and white light before hovering above the small child's head. The small child looked up at the wings with an intense, unblinking gaze. His expression changed from time to time as he made certain observations, and only after a long while did he close his eyes in deep thought. The small child opened his eyes again, and remarked, "I know what happened. This Kuan-Peng feather is far more difficult to refine than I'd anticipated. We've infused it into the wings, but the power of the wind-related heavenly laws of the world within haven't been completely captured. As such, it only possesses the power of a spirit treasure replica and isn't even close to a divine spirit treasure." "Then how do I capture that power?" Han Li asked in a cold voice. "If you want to activate the power, you'll have to either switch to a wind attribute cultivation art, which you should be able to do at your current cultivation base, or find a top-grade wind attribute spirit stone," the small child replied. "Switching to a wind attribute cultivation art or finding a wind attribute top-grade spirit stone? I can do neither of those," Han Li immediately replied. "Then there's nothing I can do. Perhaps there are other ways, but there's no way that those methods would be viable here in the human world, so it would only be a waste of time for me to elaborate on them," the small child said in a resigned manner. "So what you're saying is, my refinement method was correct, yet your predictions were wrong," Han Li accused. That does appear to be the case." An awkward expression finally appeared on the small child's face. A light flashed through Han Li's eyes, and his expression suddenly eased as he said, "So be it. I'm already satisfied with the thunderstorm wings' ability to activate the powers of wind and lightning at the same time. If it really did become as powerful as you proclaimed it would, I wouldn't be able to handle it with my current power level anyway." The small child faltered upon hearing this before a suspicious look appeared in his eyes. In terms of cultivation base, this human cultivator was nothing to him. However, he knew that this man was not the kind of person to so graciously accept the under-delivery of a promise to him. The small child stared at Han Li for a short while before deciding to take the initiative. "If you have some conditions, then state them. I can consider doing you a favor or two to make up for this error in judgment." "Seeing as you've already made the offer, I have no choice but to accept," Han Li replied with a smile. The small child rolled his eyes upon hearing this. Han Li patted his storage pouch and a burst of azure light erupted from within. After the light receded, a few strange objects had appeared before Han Li. There was a fist-sized clump of transparent gluey substance, 3 shiny black crystals, one of which was big while the other 2 were smaller, a black and white bead, and pitch-black thumb-sized eyeball. Han Li pointed at these items, and said, "These materials are all items that I've obtained by chance, but I'm unable to identify how they can be applied in practical usage. You're from a higher realm, so you must be more knowledgeable and experienced than I am. I was hoping that you could provide me with some guidance." "Where did you get these materials? The other ones aren't really all that noteworthy, but these 2 are quite rare even in the spirit realm." A hint of surprise appeared on the small child's face as he feigned a grabbing motion, upon which 2 objects immediately flew toward him. Chapter 1180, Fire Spirit Threads and the Law Destruction Eye. Han Li turned to discover that the endless sky beast's attention had been drawn to the transparent substance and that inky black eyeball. "Do you recognize what they are? Please tell me how you obtained these 2 items first, fellow Daoist Han." The small child turned to Han Li with a hint of bewilderment in his eyes. "I found one of them in a fire cauldron that had been burning for an indefinite number of years, while the other one is the 3rd eye of a 3-eyed demon beast," Han Li replied. "That makes sense. It's exactly as I thought, then." The small child nodded as if he had expected that response. He picked up the ball of transparent substance first, and introduced, "This thing from that fire cauldron is known as the fire spirit threads, and they're an exceptional material for refining fire attribute armor, which are quite rare even in the spirit realm. Its true form is an even rarer form of yin type, and if it were to be constantly heated by scorching flames and melted as a result, it would form this type of substance. Fire spirit threads. Han Li looked at the transparent substance in the small child's hands, and a peculiar look appeared on his face. This was the first time that he had ever heard of this substance, but no matter how he looked at it, it didn't appear to be in a thread-like form at all. A hesitant look then appeared on the small child's face as he said, "This is not the fire spirit thread's final form. It's going to require a cultivator who specializes in fire attribute cultivation arts to refine this substance into strands before it reaches that stage. That's something that's going to be beyond you. Fire spirit threads are a rare treasure in itself, and it can either be used as a material or refined directly into weapons. If you were to refine them into weapons, their powers wouldn't be inferior to that of the average flying sword. However, what's rather strange is that this type of fire spirit threads should be faint blue in color, yet your one here is semi-transparent. It seems to be a little different from how I remember it to be." A thought occurred to Han Li, and his expression changed slightly as he asked, "Oh, I see. How long would it normally take for this kind of substance to form over flames?" The reason why this material is quite rare is precisely because it takes a long time to form. At a minimum, it'll take over 100 years, and at most, it can even take up to several centuries. Normally speaking, the longer this process, the smaller the material's mass will become, but it'll also increase in purity, the small child explained. "I see." A flash of enlightenment appeared in Han Li's eyes. "What is it? Have you thought of something?" The small child looked at Han Li with a curious expression. "Nothing much. Tell me about the other thing." Han Li smiled and didn't reveal anything as he turned his attention to that eyeball. The small child's expression darkened slightly, but he decided not to pry any further into the matter in the end. Instead, he cast his gaze toward the black eyeball and said, "This eyeball is an extraordinary treasure, and even I'm quite drawn to it. It's a pity that only my avatar had descended into this world, and this treasure's attributes aren't right for me, either. If I were to cultivate it, the benefits I would derive would be limited, yet it could damage my spiritual sense. Is this eyeball really such a big deal?" Han Li faltered upon hearing the small child's words, and a skeptical look appeared on his face. Back when he had slain that three-eyed demon beast, he had felt that this eyeball was indeed rather special. However, he didn't think that it was anywhere near as important a treasure as the Endless Sky Beast was proclaiming it to be. "HMPH, you don't know anything. You've heard about heavenly true spirits like dragons and killins, right?" "Of course I've heard of them. Those heavenly spirit beasts have long ceased to exist in our human world, but there have been many stories passed down about them. Does this eyeball have something to do with them?" Han Li was very surprised to hear this. The small child explained with a serious expression, "No, but it's close enough. This is the third eye of the Xianxia beast, the sworn enemies of the dragons, and this eye is the vastly renowned Law Destruction Eye in our spirit realm. This beast has 3 heads and 5 tails, and there's only one eye on its central head, which is the Law Destruction Eye. It's said that the Xianxia beast will never open this eye on normal occasions, but once it does, it'll be able to directly tear open space and slay enemies through the powers of the eye alone. Of course, this eye on its own won't be quite that powerful. However, if it were to be cultivated using some kind of secret technique, it can be used to unleash some strong techniques. It can be used to directly attack the enemy and see through the majority of illusionary techniques. Even movement and teleportation techniques can't escape the tracking abilities of this eye. This is why some cultivators who specialize in techniques like the Heaven's Eye technique regard this eyeball as a revered treasure and would go to great lengths to try and obtain it." Han Li drew a sharp breath upon hearing this. He stared blankly at the eyeball in the small child's hand and was momentarily at a loss for words. If this was the true Law Destruction Eye of a Xianxia beast, then its value wouldn't be far off from the Golden Jade Tome. However, this Law Destruction Eye doesn't appear to be very pure. Looks like the 3-eyed demon beast that you killed wasn't a true Xianxia beast, but was only a spirit beast that inherited a part of the Xianxia beast's bloodline. Also, it appears that you extracted the eyeball before it had a chance to grow into full maturity. I don't know whether to congratulate you on your luck or lament your loss," the small child sighed with a shake of his head. "What do you mean by that?"
Xianxia.
"It's very simple. If this were the eyeball of a mature Xianxia beast, then it would naturally be impossible for someone of your cultivation base to cultivate the Law Destruction Eye. However, seeing as it's not a fully mature eye, you can give it a try, but the Law Destruction Eye that you attain from cultivating this eye won't be anywhere near as powerful. Also, this eye isn't the eye of a true Ci-Li beast, so the abilities that you'll attain from cultivating it will also be slightly different from those of the true Law Destruction Eye, the small child explained in a serious manner. So you're saying that the abilities of this eye will be far inferior compared to those of the Law Destruction Eye? Han Li asked. Normally speaking, that would be the case, but this is not without exceptions. I recall that the Scorching Heaven Demon King of the Spirit Realm's 9 Spirit Mountains seemed to have inherited part of a Fire Chilean's bloodline, but the true fire abilities he attained were quite fearsome even to a true Fire Chilean. However, these cases are extremely rare, but if I recall correctly, you seem to be planning on sneaking over to the Spirit Realm through a spatial node. In that case, you're going to have to cultivate this Law Destruction Eye. A hint of a smile appeared on the small child's face. Why's that? Han Li raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had inquired the Endless Sky Beast about spatial nodes a long time ago, but unfortunately, it was also the beast's first time descending into the human world, so it knew a very minimal amount on this topic. However, it was suddenly bringing up this subject again, and Han Li found that to be rather perplexing. The Ci-Li beast can't forcibly travel through spatial rifts to other realms like the heaven-roaming Kuan Peng or a Luo Mion beast can, but it possesses abilities that can weaken the boundary between realms. As to how much the boundary would be weakened, that would naturally depend on the power of this eye, the small child replied calmly. Does this eye really have that kind of ability? Han Li was truly tempted now. Once you cultivate this eye, you'll naturally know whether it can grant you that ability or not. Why would I lie to you? The small child chuckled. Han Li fell into deep thought upon hearing this. The small child merely smiled and continued to examine the 2 objects in his hands while Han Li mulled over the issue. When Han Li raised his head again, he had already managed to compose himself, and he asked, setting these 2 items aside for now, do you recognize the other 2 materials? It appeared that he had completely cast the matter about the Law Destruction Eye to the back of his mind. A hint of surprise flashed through the small child's eyes upon seeing this, but he still replied nonchalantly, those 3 crystals are dream separation crystals. They are little noteworthy, but can only be used to refine disposable treasures that can unleash illusionary techniques on only one occasion, so it's not very useful to normal cultivators like us. However, I've heard of a heavenly illusion sect in the spirit realm that once offered astronomical prices to purchase these crystals, but quickly repealed this order for some unknown reason. As for whether this crystal can serve some other purpose, that's beyond me. After all, these crystals are quite rare and as a result, their uses aren't very well documented. As for that black and white demon core, I cannot identify it at all. However, its attributes seem to be very special. Would you be able to describe the appearance of the demon core that it belonged to? That demon beast's appearance as very strange. Han Li's brows furrowed as he recalled that demon beast, which had the appearance of a pile of rotten flesh that he had slain in the lake within the Devilfall Valley. After hearing Han Li's description, the small child thought to himself for a while before finally shaking his head. I've never heard of any demon beast like it. I can only assume that it's some type of mutant demon beast. However, from your description, it appears that the demon beast wasn't very powerful, so its demon core most likely won't be very useful either, the small child analyzed. But this demon beast's ability to conceal its aura is very interesting. Perhaps this demon core can be used for tool refinement purposes, Han Li mused. He feigned a grabbing motion and the black and white demon core immediately flew into his hand. After rotating over his palm for a while, wisps of black and white qi began to emanate from it, but there was a clear separation between the 2 types of qi, creating quite a stark contrast. The small child turned his gaze to Han Li, and hesitated momentarily before offering, how about this? As compensation for my error in judgment with regard to your thunderstorm wings, I can provide you with the methods to refine the fire spirit threads and Law Destruction Eye. However, whether you'd like to refine these 2 items and whether you can succeed in doing so is completely up to you. All right, we'll do as you say. Han Li accepted the offer without any hesitation, as if he had been waiting for the small child to make that offer all along. The small child faltered momentarily upon seeing this, and a slightly gloomy expression appeared on his face as his body swayed and disappeared. The two objects in his hands naturally fell toward the ground. However, Han Li reached out and grabbed the transparent substance and the black eyeball before they could fall very far. Almost at the exact same moment, the endless sky beast began to transmit its voice to him, and the contents of the voice transmission were none other than the refinement methods for these two items. Han Li's heart stirred and he immediately sat down with his eyes closed, paying close attention to the voice transmission. Half a day later, several Foundation establishment stage stewards were gathered within a pavilion at the foot of a mountain within the drifting cloud sect. They were sorting through a pile of materials in a storage pouch when a streak of red light suddenly flew into the pavilion. The red light circled through the air before landing in the hand of one of the blue-robed cultivators. The red light transformed into a ball of flames, from within which a jade slip and a badge came falling out. The blue-robed steward caught the two items, and upon closer inspection of the badge, his expression changed drastically as he hurriedly reached both hands into the fireball. Moments later, the fireball disappeared amid a loud explosion, yet the blue-robed cultivator's expression only became more grave.